Some dogs don't disappear. Sometimes they're just waiting in the dark for the one person who never stopped loving them. Snow drifted sideways across the empty industrial road outside Saskatchewan, the kind of dry prairie snowfall that hissed softly against patrol car windows and buried old footprints before dawn could find them. The temperature had already fallen to -22 degrees Celsius, and the city felt smaller under the weight of winter. Streetlights glowed dim through the blowing white haze while distant freight trains moaned somewhere beyond the frozen rail yards like tired ghosts crossing the night. Constable Nathan Calder rubbed a hand across his jaw as his cruiser rolled past abandoned warehouses near the edge of the river district. 12 years on the force had carved quiet habits into him. Scan the mirrors. Watch the alleys. Expect silence before trouble. The radio crackled softly beside him. Unit 7, possible stray animal complaint near the old Hanson milling plant. Caller reports aggressive dog scavenging near dumpsters. Nathan exhaled slowly. Copy that. His voice sounded tired even to himself. The dispatcher hesitated before replying. Caller thinks it might be a Doberman. Nathan's fingers tightened around the steering wheel for half a second. Just enough to hurt. Then he drove on without another word. Snow crunched beneath the cruiser tires as he turned into the abandoned lot. The Hanson plant had been empty for years, its broken windows black against the storm, metal siding rattling whenever the wind cut through the narrow corridors between buildings. A faded Canadian flag still hung frozen near the loading dock, stiff as cardboard beneath layers of ice. Nathan killed the engine. For a moment, the world went still except for the heater ticking softly as it cooled. He stepped out into the cold. The air bit instantly through his gloves. His flashlight beam sliced across rusted barrels, drifting snowbanks, and piles of discarded pallets leaning crooked against concrete walls. Then he heard it. Not barking. Not growling. Breathing. Slow. Ragged. Hidden somewhere beyond the loading bay. Nathan moved carefully, boots crunching across packed snow as the flashlight trembled faintly in his hand. The smell hit him before the sight did. Wet fur. Dirt. Hunger. The scent of an animal surviving too long alone. Near the far corner of the loading dock, something shifted in the darkness. Low to the ground. Watching him. Two amber eyes reflected. In the beam. Nathan froze. Every sound around him seemed to disappear beneath the pulse suddenly hammering inside his chest. The dog stepped forward slowly from behind a broken forklift. Thin. Black and rust coat dulled by grime. Ribs visible beneath its sides. One ear torn near the tip. A chain dragging softly behind its back leg with each careful step. The Doberman didn't snarl. Didn't run. It simply stared at him like it had crossed 1,000 kilometers just to stand there one more time. Nathan's breath caught in his throat. No, the word barely escaped him. Snow swirled between them while the flashlight beam lowered toward the dog's neck. Rusted metal glinted beneath the fur. A collar. Old leather cracked by weather and time. The tag hanging from it swung gently in the wind. Nathan took one slow step closer. His knees felt weak suddenly. The Doberman flinched hard at the movement, retreating half a meter into the shadows before stopping again. Fear lived inside the animal now. Deep and permanent. Nathan swallowed hard as he crouched carefully onto the frozen concrete. His voice cracked the moment he spoke. Onyx? The dog's ears twitched instantly at the sound of the name. And in that exact second, Nathan Calder felt 4 years of guilt crash into his chest like winter breaking through thin ice. The Doberman stood motionless beneath the broken loading light while snow gathered slowly across his scarred back. Nathan could barely breathe. 4 years. 4 winters. 4 years of forcing himself to believe the river, the fire, and the collapsing warehouse had taken everything. Yet here Onyx was, alive somehow, staring at him through the drifting Saskatchewan storm with eyes that still carried the same quiet intelligence Nathan remembered from patrol nights long before everything fell apart. The officer lowered himself carefully onto one knee against the frozen concrete. The cold soaked instantly through his uniform pants, but he did not feel it. His flashlight rested dim beside his boot now, casting weak yellow light across the dock while the wind rattled loose sheets of metal overhead. "Easy, buddy," Nathan whispered. His voice trembled in a way it never did on duty. "Easy." Onyx took a cautious half-step forward, chain scraping softly behind him. Then he stopped again. Nathan noticed the change immediately. The dog's body language was wrong. Not aggressive. Not wild. Afraid. Deeply. Afraid. The kind of fear built slowly over years. One shoulder flinched each time the wind slammed somewhere nearby. His head stayed slightly lowered as if expecting punishment to follow any sudden movement. Nathan felt something tighten painfully inside his chest. Onyx had once been fearless. Back then the Doberman moved through forests, alleyways, and frozen back roads beside him like he belonged to the storm itself. Nathan could still remember the first day they met at the RCMP K9 training grounds outside Regina. Onyx had been barely 18 months old, all muscle and restless energy, black coat gleaming under sharp autumn sunlight while trainers struggled to keep him focused. Every handler who approached the kennel got the same reaction. Growling. Pacing. Refusal. Then Nathan walked in carrying a double-double coffee and wearing snow on his boots from the early October storm outside. The Doberman had gone completely still. Not submissive. Curious. Nathan remembered crouching beside the gate while the trainer laughed softly. That dog doesn't trust anybody. But Onyx had walked forward anyway. Slow. Careful. Then pressed his nose once against Nathan's hand like he had already made the decision himself. From that day forward, they became inseparable. Drug interdictions near the Manitoba border. Search operations outside Prince Albert. Long freezing patrol nights where snow piled nearly 30 centimeters deep along abandoned roads while Onyx tracked missing hikers through pine forests without hesitation. Nathan used to joke that the dog could smell fear beneath 2 meters of snow. But it was never really a joke. Onyx had instincts officers trusted more than radio sometimes. And more than once, those instincts brought men home alive. Nathan swallowed hard as the memories hit him one after another beneath the flickering warehouse light. He remembered Onyx leaping into icy water during a spring rescue near Lake Diefenbaker. Remembered the dog refusing to leave Nathan's side after a rollover crash on Highway 11 during black ice conditions. Most of all, he remembered the silence afterward. The silence after the fire 4 years ago. The silence when search crews gave up. The silence inside his apartment every night since. A gust of wind swept snow across the dock again. Onyx suddenly lifted his head. His amber eyes locked onto Nathan's face with painful focus. Then slowly, uncertainly, the Doberman's tail moved once against the concrete. Nathan's jaw tightened instantly. He looked away for a second, trying to steady himself. But when he looked back, Onyx had taken another step closer. The old tag hanging from his collar tapped softly against rusted metal. Nathan could finally read the engraving beneath the frost. K9 Onyx. RCMP Unit 12. The same tag Nathan had clipped onto him with his own hands years ago. His throat burned. "You remembered me," he whispered softly into the cold night air. And somewhere deep beneath the broken sounds of the storm, the Doberman let out the faintest trembling whine. The wind pushed harder through the broken milling plant as Nathan slowly removed his right glove. The cold hit his bare skin instantly, sharp enough to sting, but he barely noticed. Onyx watched every movement from a few meters away, body tense beneath the drifting snow. The old chain hanging from his leg scraped softly against the concrete whenever he shifted his weight. Nathan could see the exhaustion in him now. The trembling muscles. The dullness beneath the once sleek black coat. Whatever the Doberman had survived inside this forgotten place had carved deep marks into him without leaving many visible wounds. Nathan lowered his hand carefully, palm open toward the ground the same way he had done hundreds of times during training years ago. "You remember this, buddy?" he whispered. His voice stayed low and steady despite the ache building in his chest. "Come on. It is just me." For several long seconds, nothing happened. Snow hissed across the loading dock. Somewhere deeper inside the building, loose metal clanged softly in the wind like distant church bells. Onyx stared at Nathan's hand without moving. Then slowly, painfully slowly, the Doberman stepped closer. Nathan's breathing grew shallow. Each step seemed uncertain, like the dog was fighting memories stronger than instinct. One step. Pause. Another step. The chain dragged behind him in uneven rhythm. Nathan noticed old marks around the dog's neck beneath the collar. Not fresh. Not bleeding. Just the faded signs of years spent restrained too often and too long. His jaw tightened hard enough to tremble. He wanted to ask questions no one could answer yet. Who kept him here? Why nobody reported him? How a trained police dog vanished for 4 years only to end up starving inside an abandoned Saskatchewan warehouse. But the questions did not matter right now. Only the dog did. Onyx finally stopped close enough for Nathan to hear him breathing. The Doberman's nose twitched carefully toward the officer's hand. Then suddenly his body stiffened. A loud metallic bang echoed somewhere behind the loading bay as the storm slammed a loose steel panel against the wall. Onyx recoiled instantly. His ears flattened. He stumbled backward fast enough for the chain to snap tight against broken machinery behind him. Nathan's heart dropped. "Easy," he said quickly. "Easy, Onyx. You are okay." The Doberman stood frozen in panic, chest heaving hard while snow gathered along his back. Nathan remained perfectly still. No sudden movement. No command voice. Just patience. He remembered the trainers teaching recruits years ago that trust was never forced into a K9. It was earned quietly, moment by moment, until the dog chose you back. And somehow, despite everything that had happened, Nathan realized Onyx was still trying to choose him. Slowly, the Doberman lowered his head again. His amber eyes stayed locked onto Nathan's face as he crept forward once more. Then finally, trembling almost imperceptibly, Onyx pressed his cold nose into Nathan's bare palm. Nathan closed his eyes immediately. The feeling nearly broke him. Underneath the dirt, the cold, and the years of loss, the scent was still there. Pine forests. Snow. Old leather seats inside patrol trucks. Early mornings before sunrise near Regina. Home. Nathan let out an uneven breath that turned white in the freezing air. "Good boy," he whispered softly. "Good boy." The word seemed to unlock something inside the dog. Onyx released a faint sound deep in his throat, not quite a bark, not quite a cry. Then before Nathan could react, the Doberman leaned forward heavily against his chest. Nathan caught him instantly, arms wrapping around the thin shaking body as the chain rattled against the concrete. The dog weighed far less than he should have. Bones beneath fur. Weakness beneath loyalty. Nathan pressed his forehead gently against Onyx's neck while snow drifted around them in silence. For the first time in 4 years, the officer no longer felt like he was standing beside a ghost. But as he reached carefully to free the rusted chain tangled around the dog's hind leg, his flashlight beam swept briefly across the darkness behind the loading dock. And there, half buried beneath snow near the wall, Nathan spotted several empty food tins, a stained blanket, and fresh boot prints leading deeper into the abandoned plant. The flashlight beam lingered over the snow-covered boot prints while Nathan kept one arm wrapped around Onyx's trembling body. The Doberman stayed pressed against him now, exhausted enough to stop resisting, though every distant sound still made his muscles tighten beneath the thin coat. Nathan could feel the rapid heartbeat through the fur. Fast. Nervous. Survival had become the dog's natural state. He glanced again toward the dark corridor leading deeper into the abandoned plant. The prints were fresh. Not buried by snow yet. Somebody had been here recently. Maybe only hours earlier. A cold gust swept through the loading bay carrying the smell of rust, wet cement, and something older underneath it all. Smoke. Not fresh smoke. The stale scent of cheap cigarettes trapped in old concrete walls. Nathan's instincts sharpened immediately. Years in policing taught him when a place still belonged to someone, even if the world had forgotten it. He slowly unclipped his radio from his shoulder. Dispatch, Unit 7. Static crackled softly before the operator answered. Go ahead. Nathan kept his voice low while watching the corridor. Requesting secondary unit at Hanson Milling Plant. Possible trespass activity inside the property. He hesitated briefly, glancing down at the exhausted Doberman leaning against him. And notify Animal Services I located a missing K9. There was a pause. Copy that, Unit 7. Additional unit is 20 minutes out due to road conditions. 20 minutes. Nathan looked toward the drifting snow outside the loading dock. The storm was worsening fast. Visibility had dropped to maybe 30 meters now. He knew they could not stay exposed much longer. Carefully, he knelt lower beside Onyx and began untangling the rusted chain wrapped near the dog's hind leg. The metal links were old and stiff with corrosion. One section appeared bolted to a broken support beam nearby, as though someone wanted the dog confined to that small corner permanently. Nathan swallowed hard. Who did this to you? He murmured quietly. Onyx lowered his eyes at the sound of Nathan's voice but did not pull away. The trust was returning slowly now, fragile as thin ice on spring water. Nathan finally loosened the last twisted section of chain and let it fall heavily onto the concrete. The metallic clang echoed through the warehouse. Instantly, Onyx flinched hard and turned toward the dark hallway again. A low growl rumbled deep in his chest. Nathan froze. The Doberman's posture changed completely. Fear mixed suddenly with alertness. Working instinct. The same instinct that once made officers trust him with their lives. Nathan slowly reached for the flashlight beside his boot and swept the beam toward the corridor. At first he saw only drifting dust and cracked concrete pillars disappearing into darkness. Then something moved. Fast. A shadow crossing behind a row of rusted machinery deeper inside the plant. Nathan stood immediately, pulse quickening. Police, he called firmly into the darkness. Come out where I can see you. Silence answered him. Only the wind outside and the soft hum of loose electrical wires overhead. Onyx stepped closer against Nathan's leg, growling lower now, eyes fixed ahead with absolute focus. Nathan knew that look. The dog had detected something. Someone. He pulled his service flashlight higher while carefully placing one hand near his holstered sidearm, though he prayed he would not need it tonight. The beam swept again across old conveyor belts coated in frost and piles of abandoned equipment buried beneath years of dust. Then he saw it. A sleeping bag near the far wall. Empty food wrappers. 2 propane canisters. Someone had been living inside the mill recently. Maybe more than one person. Nathan's jaw tightened. The realization settled heavily in his chest. If people were hiding here during winter, they likely found Onyx long before tonight. Which meant the dog had not survived alone after all. Another sound suddenly echoed from somewhere upstairs. Footsteps. Quick. Then gone. Nathan lifted the flashlight sharply toward the metal catwalks above. Snow blew through broken windows near the ceiling, swirling across hanging chains and rusted railings. But no face appeared. No voice answered. Beside him, Onyx released another uneasy growl and pressed tighter against Nathan's leg as if warning him not to follow. And for the first time since finding the Doberman alive, Nathan realized something even colder than the storm outside. Onyx was not only afraid of being abandoned again. He was afraid of whoever had been keeping him here. Snow whipped through the shattered upper windows of the milling plant while Nathan slowly guided Onyx toward the loading dock entrance. The Doberman limped beside him carefully now, staying so close their shoulders brushed with each step. Every few seconds the dog glanced nervously toward the dark interior behind them, ears twitching at sounds Nathan could barely hear. Somewhere inside the building, old pipes groaned beneath the cold. Water dripped steadily through rusted beams. The whole structure felt alive in the worst possible way, like it remembered things people wanted forgotten. Nathan kept his flashlight trained ahead while leading Onyx toward the cruiser parked beyond the drifting snowbanks. "You are getting out of here tonight," he said quietly. "No more chains. No more cold floors." The Doberman looked up briefly at the sound of his voice. Tired amber eyes. Trust trying carefully to return. Nathan opened the rear door of the cruiser and grabbed the emergency blanket stored behind the seat. The moment he shook it open, Onyx flinched hard and backed away 2 quick steps, claws scraping against ice beneath the snow. Nathan stopped immediately. "Easy," he murmured. "It is okay." The dog's breathing turned shallow again. Nathan realized then how many ordinary movements had probably become threats inside the animal's memory. Raised hands. Sudden sounds. Fast motions. He lowered the blanket slowly onto the ground instead and waited. After several tense seconds, Onyx cautiously stepped closer and allowed Nathan to wrap the heavy fleece around his shoulders. The Doberman trembled beneath it almost instantly, as though his body finally understood warmth again after years without safety. Nathan swallowed against the ache rising inside his throat. Then his flashlight beam caught something near the cruiser tire. Fresh paw prints. Smaller than Onyx's. Nathan frowned. He crouched carefully, studying the snow beneath the drifting flakes. The track circled the loading area and disappeared beneath a broken side entrance near the far wall. Not coyote tracks. Domestic. Another dog. Onyx suddenly stiffened beside him. A low whine escaped the Doberman's throat. Nathan turned toward the dark side entrance. "What is it?" Onyx stared at the doorway without blinking. Then, despite his exhaustion, the Doberman pulled weakly against Nathan's grip and tried to move toward it. Nathan hesitated only a second before following. The side corridor smelled worse than the loading dock. Damp concrete. Mold. Old smoke. His flashlight swept over peeling walls covered in faded safety signs and frozen puddles reflecting weak yellow light. The wind barely reached this part of the building, making the silence feel heavier somehow. Onyx limped ahead slowly now, nose working the air with renewed focus. Then Nathan heard it. Faint. Almost hidden beneath the storm outside. A soft scratching. Sound. Nathan stopped instantly. "Hello." His voice echoed through the corridor. No answer came. Only another weak scratching noise somewhere behind a collapsed storage room door. Onyx moved forward immediately. The Doberman pressed his nose against the warped metal panel and released a quiet sound deep in his throat unlike anything Nathan had heard from him before. Not fear. Concern. Nathan grabbed the edge of the damaged door and pulled hard until rusted hinges groaned open. The flashlight beam cut into darkness. At first he saw only old insulation and broken shelving. Then something moved near the back wall. A small black shape curled tightly beneath a torn tarp. Nathan stepped closer slowly. The shape lifted its head weakly. Another Doberman. Younger. Female. Frightened eyes reflecting the flashlight beam. She looked barely more than a year old and painfully thin, ribs visible beneath her dark coat. A frayed rope still hung loosely around her neck. Nathan felt the air leave his lungs. Oh God! The young dog tried to stand but collapsed almost immediately against the concrete. Beside Nathan, Onyx moved forward carefully and touched his nose gently against hers. The smaller Doberman released a faint whimper and pressed closer to him instinctively, like she already trusted him more than the world around them. Nathan stared at the scene in silence while snow rattled softly against broken windows overhead. Then he noticed something else near the wall behind the dogs. Empty food tins. Fresh water in a metal bowl. And folded neatly beside them, an old winter coat that still carried warmth. The smaller Doberman trembled beneath the torn tarp while Onyx remained close beside her, his body angled protectively between the young dog and the doorway. Nathan lowered himself carefully onto one knee again, flashlight resting against the floor now so the beam would not shine directly into her eyes. The room smelled faintly of wet fur, old fabric, and canned soup. Someone had been trying to keep the dogs alive. Not well. Not safely. But alive. Nathan reached slowly toward the folded winter coat near the wall. It was heavy wool, dark green, stained by dirt and snow. Still warm. He frowned immediately. Whoever had been here could not have left long ago. Maybe less than an hour. The realization tightened every instinct inside him. Outside, the storm pressed harder against the building. Snow rattled against broken windows. In long cold bursts while distant train horns echoed somewhere beyond the river. The whole mill seemed suspended between silence and memory. Nathan glanced toward the corridor again before turning back to the younger dog. Hey there, he whispered softly. Nobody is going to hurt you. The Doberman tried weakly to lift her head. One ear folded nervously backward while her eyes stayed fixed on Nathan's face. Fear lived there too. But beneath it, something gentler remained. Hope perhaps. Or simple exhaustion. Onyx lowered his nose against the side of her neck and released another quiet rumble deep in his chest. Nathan had heard that sound years ago during K9 recovery training. Comfort. Reassurance. The older dog was trying to calm her. Nathan swallowed hard. Even after everything done to him, Onyx still protected others first. His radio crackled suddenly against his shoulder, shattering the fragile stillness. Unit 7, secondary unit arriving on scene. The younger Doberman startled violently at the noise, scrambling backward against the wall before collapsing again from weakness. Nathan immediately lowered the radio volume. Copy, he answered quietly. Approach the east loading dock only. Possible frightened animals inside. He clipped the radio back slowly and looked at the dogs again. We are getting you both out tonight. Onyx's ears twitched at the words. Then unexpectedly, the older Doberman stepped away from the younger dog and moved toward the far corner of the storage room. Nathan watched carefully as Onyx began nosing at something beneath a pile of old blankets and cardboard. The dog pawed weakly once against the floor, then looked back at Nathan. What is it? Nathan stood and approached cautiously. Beneath the blanket sat a small plastic container with a cracked blue lid. Inside were veterinary bandages, antiseptic spray, and packets of dry dog food carefully sealed against moisture. Nathan stared silently for a moment. This was no random squatter's camp. Somebody had been caring for these dogs intentionally. Poorly maybe. Secretly perhaps. But intentionally. Then he noticed the folded piece of paper tucked beneath the container. His pulse slowed strangely as he picked it up. The handwriting looked uneven, almost shaky from cold. Feed them twice if I cannot get back before dark. The roads are bad again. Nathan read the line twice. No signature. No explanation. Just those words. Beside him, Onyx sat slowly against the wall, exhaustion finally catching up to him. The Doberman's breathing sounded rough now, slower than before. Nathan immediately crouched beside him. Stay with me, buddy. Onyx blinked heavily but leaned his head against Nathan's arm without resisting. The younger female crawled closer too, curling weakly against Onyx's side beneath the tarp. Nathan looked between the two dogs and felt something shift painfully inside him. For 4 years he believed Onyx died alone somewhere beneath snow and fire. Instead, somehow, this broken old K9 had survived long enough to protect another abandoned soul inside a forgotten building no one cared about anymore. Footsteps echoed suddenly from the corridor outside. Slow. Careful. Nathan stood immediately, flashlight rising toward the doorway. Police, he called firmly. Show yourself. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then from the darkness beyond the storage room entrance, a thin voice answered quietly through the storm. Please do not take them away from me. The flashlight beam remained fixed on the storage room doorway while the storm groaned through the broken mill around them. Nathan's shoulders tightened instantly at the sound of the voice. Thin. Young. Frightened. Not the voice of someone dangerous. Slowly, a figure stepped into the weak light spilling across the corridor floor. A teenage girl, maybe 16 or 17 years old, stood wrapped in an oversized parka several sizes too big for her frame. Snow clung to the sleeves and the fur lining of her hood. Her cheeks were pale from cold, and exhaustion sat heavily beneath her eyes. She froze the moment she saw Nathan's uniform. One hand tightened nervously around the strap of a worn backpack hanging from her shoulder. The other stayed raised slightly as if prepared to shield herself. Please, she whispered again. I was coming back. Nathan lowered the flashlight a few centimeters, enough to soften the glare. What is your name? The girl hesitated. Her gaze drifted immediately toward the 2 Dobermans curled near the wall. Onyx watched her quietly now, no longer growling. Maya, she answered finally. Maya Laurent. Nathan studied her carefully. There was dirt along the knees of her jeans and frost collecting near the edges of cracked winter boots. She looked cold enough to collapse. You have been staying here. Maya gave a small nod without meeting his eyes. Only since November. The words carried embarrassment more than defiance. Nathan glanced toward the sleeping bag, the canned food, the veterinary supplies. Pieces began settling together slowly inside his mind. These dogs belong to you? Maya shook her head immediately. No. Him, her eyes moved toward Onyx. I found him first. Nathan felt his chest tighten again. Maya stepped cautiously into the room, moving slowly so the younger Doberman would not panic. The small female lifted her head weakly at the sight of her and released a faint whine. Maya immediately knelt beside the dog despite the freezing floor. Easy, Lyra, she whispered gently while stroking her neck. I am here. Nathan watched silently. The fear in the dogs eased the moment the girl touched them. Especially Onyx. The older Doberman's eyes never left Maya as she wrapped part of the tarp around the younger dog's shaking body. Trust. Familiarity. Gratitude even. Nathan lowered himself slowly against the wall opposite them. Tell me what happened. Maya swallowed hard. Outside, snow hammered against the windows in restless waves while red and blue patrol lights flickered faintly through cracks in the corridor beyond. The secondary unit had arrived. But for the moment, nobody interrupted the silence inside the room. Maya kept one hand resting on Lyra's shoulder while speaking quietly into the cold air. I used to sleep near the bus terminal downtown after my foster placement ended. She paused briefly. One night during the first snowfall, I saw him digging through garbage behind a diner. Her eyes moved toward Onyx. He was so skinny I could see every rib. But he still tried to protect me when some drunk guy started yelling nearby. Nathan's throat tightened unexpectedly. Of course he did. Maya continued softly. I started bringing him leftovers after closing shifts. At first he would not let me touch him. He would just watch me from far away. A faint sad smile touched her lips. Then one night it got really cold. -30 with wind chill. He followed me here. Nathan looked down at Onyx resting against the wall. Snow still melted slowly from the old Doberman's coat onto the concrete floor beneath him. For years lost to darkness, hunger, and fear. Yet somehow he still chose to guard people weaker than himself. Maya brushed trembling fingers gently along Lyra's ears. A few weeks later he brought her here too. Nathan frowned softly. Brought her? Maya nodded. She was tied behind a scrapyard near the rail tracks. He disappeared for almost an entire night. Her voice grew quieter. When he came back, she was following him. Nathan stared at Onyx in silence. The old K9 lifted his tired eyes briefly toward him as if hearing every word. And for the second time that night, Nathan felt tears burn sharply behind his eyes because even abandoned souls, broken by cold and years of survival, sometimes still spend what little strength they have rescuing someone else. The storm finally began to weaken sometime after midnight. Snow still drifted across the shattered windows of the old mill, but the violent wind had softened into a low winter whisper moving through the empty corridors. Red and blue emergency lights flickered quietly across the concrete walls while paramedics wrapped thermal blankets around Maya and checked the younger Doberman near the doorway. Lyra trembled less now. Warm broth sat untouched beside her paws, though she remained pressed tightly against Onyx as if afraid the room itself might disappear if she let go. Nathan stood near the loading dock speaking softly with Sergeant Colin Mercer from the secondary unit. Colin was older, broad-shouldered, his silver beard dusted with melting snow. He listened without interrupting while Nathan explained everything they found inside the plant. The chains. The supplies. Maya. Onyx. When Nathan finally finished, Colin glanced through the corridor toward the exhausted dogs lying together beneath blankets. You know procedures, he said quietly. Animal Services will probably take them both for assessment. Nathan's jaw tightened immediately. His eyes stayed fixed on Onyx. The old Doberman had fallen asleep for the first time since Nathan found him, though even resting, one ear twitched at every unfamiliar sound nearby. He already spent 4 years abandoned, Nathan answered softly. I am not letting him disappear again. Colin studied him for a long moment before nodding once. I figured you would say that. The older officer stepped away toward the paramedics, giving Nathan the silence he clearly needed. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the open loading dock while dawn slowly threatened the horizon beyond the river district. Saskatchewan mornings carried a certain kind of loneliness in winter. Pale blue light. Empty streets. Smoke rising from distant chimneys while the world tried quietly to survive another cold day. Nathan walked back toward the storage room where Maya sat cross-legged beneath blankets beside the dogs. She looked exhausted now that the adrenaline had faded. Young. Enough suddenly to remind him how fragile people really were once fear stopped holding them upright. Onyx lifted his head the moment Nathan entered. The Doberman's tired eyes followed him instantly through the dim room. Recognition. Trust. Relief. Nathan crouched beside him carefully. Hey, partner. Onyx pressed his muzzle weakly against Nathan's arm. The movement was small, but it carried years inside it. Maya watched them quietly before speaking. He waited for you every night. Nathan looked up slowly. What? Maya pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Whenever patrol cars passed outside, he would go to the loading dock and sit there listening. Her voice remained soft against the distant sounds of radios and boots echoing through the mill. Sometimes for hours. Nathan felt something break gently inside his chest. Maya looked down at her hands before continuing. I did not know he used to belong to police until I saw the tag under his collar after I cleaned him up one day. She paused briefly. But I think he always believed you were coming back. Nathan lowered his eyes toward Onyx. The old Doberman rested his head heavily across Nathan's knee now, breathing slow and uneven beneath the blanket. For years of cold floors, hunger, fear. And somehow the dog still waited. Not because he understood time. Not because he understood explanations. Only because loyalty does not measure abandonment the way people do. Sometimes it simply keeps loving anyway. Nathan brushed his hand carefully along the scarred side of Onyx's neck. "I searched for you," he whispered quietly. "For months." His voice cracked despite himself. "I never stopped looking." The Doberman's ears twitched faintly at the sound. Outside, the first pale edge of sunrise touched the snowy rooftops beyond the mill. Soft gold spreading slowly through frozen clouds. The kind of Canadian winter morning that arrives quietly after the world survives a hard night. Nathan sat there in silence beside the dogs and the exhausted girl while dawn crept into the broken building one cold beam at a time. Then suddenly, for the first time since that terrible fire 4 years earlier, Onyx's tail tapped softly once against the concrete floor. 3 months later, winter still held Saskatchewan in its frozen grip, but the hard edge of the season had begun to soften. Snowbanks along the roadside sagged slightly beneath warmer daylight, and narrow streams of meltwater crept along the gutters of quiet neighborhood streets in Saskatoon. The world no longer felt trapped beneath endless storm clouds. Some mornings even carried the faint scent of thawing earth beneath the cold air, as if spring were whispering from somewhere far away. Nathan stood on the wooden dock behind his small cabin at Pike Lake, coffee steaming gently between his gloved hands while dawn spread pale gold across the frozen water. The lake stretched silent beneath a sheet of ice dusted with fresh snow, and tall spruce trees lined the shoreline like dark guardians standing watch over the morning. Somewhere in the distance, a raven called once through the stillness. Then came the soft sound of claws against wood behind him. Nathan turned slowly. Onyx stepped carefully onto the dock wrapped in a thick winter dog coat, black fur healthier now beneath the morning light. He still carried scars. His left ear remained torn near the tip, and some nights he woke trembling from dreams no one could see. But the emptiness was leaving his eyes little by little. Life had begun returning to him in quiet ways. Trust does not heal loudly. It returns one gentle moment at a time. Nathan crouched and rested a hand against the Doberman's neck. "Morning, partner." Onyx leaned into the touch without hesitation now. The movement felt natural again, like old muscle memory surviving years of darkness. Behind them, the cabin door creaked open. Maya stepped onto the porch wrapped in a wool blanket with Lyra trotting closely beside her. The younger Doberman had gained weight quickly over the past weeks, her sleek black and rust coat shining healthy again beneath the rising sun. She still followed Onyx everywhere, sleeping beside him every night near the stone fireplace as though the older dog remained the safest place she had ever known. Maya smiled softly while watching them. The expression looked unfamiliar on her face still, careful and uncertain after so long spent surviving instead of living. Social services had found her temporary housing in town, but most weekends she returned to the cabin anyway. Nathan never questioned it. Some people needed time before they believed warmth could last. The same was true for dogs. Onyx moved slowly toward the edge of the dock and sat facing the frozen lake. Snowflakes drifted lightly around him while the sunrise painted faint gold along the horizon. Nathan watched quietly beside him. For years ago he lost more than a partner inside that burning warehouse near the Manitoba border. He lost the part of himself that still believed loyalty could survive tragedy. After the searches ended and the paperwork closed, Nathan buried his grief beneath long shifts and empty silence. But grief has a way of staying alive in places people do not visit often enough. Sometimes inside old memories. Sometimes inside abandoned buildings. Sometimes inside a starving dog still waiting faithfully through Canadian winters no matter how many nights pass alone. Maya stepped onto the dock carrying a worn tennis ball in one hand. "Think he is ready?" she asked softly. Nathan glanced toward Onyx. The old Doberman noticed the ball immediately. His ears lifted slightly. Not much. Just enough. Nathan smiled for the first time that morning. I think so. Maya tossed the ball gently across the snow-covered ice near shore. For a second, Onyx simply watched it land. Then slowly, almost cautiously, he stood and trotted after it. Not like a police dog. Not like a survivor running from hunger. Just like a dog remembering something good again. Nathan felt his throat tighten unexpectedly as Onyx returned carrying the ball carefully in his mouth. The Doberman stopped beside him and sat quietly, amber eyes steady beneath the pale winter sun. Nathan took the ball gently from him and rested his forehead briefly against the dog's scarred face. The lake remained silent around them while morning light spilled across the snow in soft gold ribbons. And in that quiet Canadian dawn, after years of loss, cold, and waiting, two wounded souls finally stopped searching for home because somehow, against every cruel thing the world had placed between them, they had found their way back to each other.